Elderly woman denied service. Chris Hemsworth steps in. It was a cold and quiet evening in March 2021. The upscale bistro on the edge of downtown was alive with the sound of soft conversations, clinking glasses, and the faint hum of jazz music playing in the background. The restaurant, known for its exclusivity, was filled with well-dressed patrons enjoying expensive meals under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. The atmosphere was lively, yet serene, until the door creaked open, and a sudden gust of cold air swept through the room. Heads turned briefly toward the entrance, where an elderly woman stepped inside. She wore a tattered coat, clearly not suited for the biting cold outside. Her frail hands clutched a small purse, and her eyes, though tired, held a glimmer of hope. She hesitated near the door, glancing around nervously before slowly approaching the hostess stand. The hostess, a young woman dressed in sharp black attire, glanced up from her podium with a practiced smile that quickly faded. The elderly woman cleared her throat, her voice trembling. "Excuse me, could I please get a cup of tea? Just a small one." The hostess barely looked at her before arching an eyebrow. Her tone was sharp, dismissive. "This isn't a soup kitchen, ma'am. If you can't afford it, you can't stay." The soft hum of conversations around the room seemed to pause, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. The woman's face flushed with embarrassment as she fumbled with her purse, pulling out a few crumpled bills. I can pay," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Before the hostess could reply, a deep, commanding voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Is this how you treat your guests?" All eyes turned toward the source of the voice. Sitting in the corner of the room, almost hidden by the dim light, was a man in a simple sweater and jeans. Despite his casual attire, there was no mistaking him. Chris Hemsworth, the world-famous actor known for his roles in Thor and the Avengers. He stood up slowly, his towering frame making the entire room feel smaller. His sharp gaze was fixed on the hostess, who now looked pale and unsure of herself. "Mr. Hemsworth, I didn't realize," she stammered, her composure crumbling. Chris raised a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. His tone was calm but carried an unmistakable edge. "Realize what? That someone deserves to be treated with kindness?" The hostess opened her mouth to reply but quickly closed it again, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Chris turned toward the elderly woman, his expression softening. "Ma'am, please have a seat," he said gently, pulling out a chair at a nearby table. The woman hesitated, glancing around at the many eyes now focused on her, but Chris's reassuring smile gave her the confidence to step forward. She lowered herself into the chair, her hands trembling slightly. Chris turned back to the hostess, his voice firm. "Bring her the best tea you have. And while you're at it, add a meal to her order, whatever she wants. I'll cover it." The hostess nodded quickly, retreating to the kitchen without a word. Chris sat down across from the woman, his presence calming and reassuring. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice warm. "Margaret," she replied softly, her voice still trembling. "Margaret," Chris repeated, his tone gentle. "You deserve to be treated with respect. What brings you here tonight?" Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes as she began to speak. She told him about losing her husband years ago, about how her children had moved away, leaving her to fend for herself. She explained how she had been struggling to make ends meet, relying on her dwindling savings just to survive. Tonight she had walked into the bistro hoping for a warm meal in a place where she could feel human again, even for a little while. By the time her tea and meal arrived, the entire restaurant was silent, captivated by the unexpected scene. The staff moved quietly, and the patrons watched with rapt attention, some even recording the moment on their phones. As Margaret began to eat, Chris turned his attention to the manager, who had stepped out of the back to see what was happening. The manager approached nervously, his hands wringing together. "Mr. Hemsworth, Chris cut him off with a calm yet firm tone. Your staff needs to understand something. Kindness costs nothing. This isn't just about Margaret. It's about how you treat every person who walks through that door. Make sure this never happens again. The manager nodded, his face red with shame. Before leaving, Chris turned back to Margaret. He leaned in slightly, his expression earnest. You're stronger than you realize, he said. Don't ever forget that. Margaret's eyes glistened as she whispered, Thank you. If you liked the video, subscribe and share with your friends. Have a nice day.